I used to think I'd seen everything an HOA could throw at me. Citation for a faded American flag? Sure. Mass email about my non-conforming mailbox shape? Deleted. But nothing, I mean nothing, could have prepared me for what I saw outside my window that morning. The sound hit first. Loud. Metallic. Rhythmic, like someone was trying to nail a coffin shut with a sledgehammer. I shot out of bed, tripped over my dog Mabel, and rushed to the window with the kind of panic usually reserved for house fires or alien invasions. There they were, 3 construction workers hammering steel fence posts into both sides of the creek that ran through the back of my property, the same creek where my grandfather taught me to fish, where Mabel learned how to chase frogs, badly, and where peace used to live. And sitting in the middle of it all, perched like a smug crow on a folding chair with a clipboard and a swamp-colored smoothie, was Karen Albright, our new HOA president and self-declared goddess of neighborhood harmony. She saw me before I could even yell. "You're welcome," she shouted. "We're beautifying your swamp." I leaned out the window. "That's my creek, Karen." She didn't blink. "Not exactly. It falls within the communal visibility zone per section 6.2.2 of the HOA bylaws. And because it lacks symmetrical flow and aesthetic meditation structure, we voted to enclose it. Section 6.2.2. Now, I've read the HOA bylaws cover to cover. I once represented myself in small claims court over a chicken coop, and let me tell you, there is no such section. But Karen's confidence could part rivers. And worse. She brought back up. The workers were moving fast. Already halfway through what looked like a medieval anti-tank barricade. I stormed out the front door in pajama pants and rubber boots, looking like a survivalist who'd just woken up from a bunker nap. Karen greeted me like a flight attendant mid-turbulence. "Good morning," she chirped. "This is a temporary enhancement, HOA approved, to make the area more meditative." "This is my land," I said. She smiled wider. "But land must also serve the community aesthetic. This is a collective tranquility space now." Mabel barked. Not her usual bark. The "I'm 2 seconds from calling an airstrike" bark. That's when I called Dean McKinney, my neighbor, longtime fishing buddy, and more importantly, a retired state wildlife officer. Dean smells like cedar, always carries jerky in his vest, and can track a raccoon by smell in a thunderstorm. "Dean," I said, "you need to get over here. Karen's turning my creek into a luxury spa with barbed wire." 10 minutes later, Dean's old Ford rolled in like cavalry. He stepped out, took one look at the fence line, and whistled through his teeth. "Well damn. She fenced off the whole damn thing? She says it's for communal meditation." Dean chuckled darkly. "She's gonna need a lawyer. Maybe a priest." Then his face changed. He knelt near the water's edge, pulled out a magnifier, and studied the mud. He looked up at me with something between concern and dread. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. "A bad day?" "No. This," he pointed to the creek, "is a federally protected steelhead spawning tributary. Been that way since '94. I used to tag fish here for the state. There are buried sensors upstream and downstream to monitor flow and sediment." I blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means our HOA queen over there just fenced off a federally monitored habitat. That's not just illegal, it's felony level illegal." We both turned to look at Karen, who, at that very moment, was directing a worker to install a faux bamboo trellis over the creek like she was designing a backyard spa, not actively committing an environmental crime. Dean stood up slowly. "You need to call Fish and Wildlife now." I didn't waste a second. I took photos, shot video, marked the location, and sent a detailed report to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Regional Office, complete with GPS tags and a clip of Karen shooing children away from the creek like some kind of pond demon. By sundown, I had a reply. It was short. It was direct. And it was the beginning of the end for Karen. "Thank you for the report. Our agents are aware of the site and will conduct an investigation immediately. Any obstruction of federally protected waterways is subject to enforcement under Title 16 of the U.S. Code. She had no idea what she'd just triggered. Karen didn't slow down. If anything, she doubled down. The very next day, as if my federal report was a suggestion box comment, she hosted a full-on gathering she called the Creekfront Visualization Initiative. Her guests? A dozen linen-clad HOA worshippers, all clutching crystals and muttering affirmations as they gathered around the Serenity fence she'd just finished. The fence now had wind chimes, hanging lanterns, and a faux stone fountain trickling water into a plastic Home Depot bucket. One woman asked Karen if the creek had healing properties. Karen didn't miss a beat. It used to. But I'm cleansing it from the chaos now. I stood at the edge of my lawn with my dog Mabel and a cup of coffee that I strongly considered replacing with whiskey. It wasn't just nonsense anymore. It was delusional environmental cosplay. So I made the call, again. This time. To Dean. He answered with a whisper of excitement. Like a hunter spotting tracks. They're coming, he said. Fish and Wildlife. Today. Apparently your photos made the rounds at the regional office. I looked at Mabel. Showtime. Around noon. An unmarked white SUV rolled into the neighborhood. It did a slow circle past Karen's house, then parked just down the street from mine. Out stepped two men and a woman, all dressed like birdwatchers with advanced degrees, khaki pants, field vests, serious expressions. One of them carried a black case. Not for a violin. You could tell. Dean stood across the street pretending to restring a fishing rod. I trimmed hedges that didn't need trimming. We watched them casually approach the creek. Then they saw the fence. They stopped cold. One of the agents actually muttered, "You've got to be kidding me." Right on cue, Karen stormed out of her house like she'd just been called to defend her throne. Clipboard in hand. That same smoothie in tow. "Can I help you?" she asked, positioning herself like a bouncer at a music festival. One agent calmly held up a badge. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. "Ma'am, we're here investigating a reported obstruction of a federally protected waterway." Karen scoffed. "This is HOA-regulated land. You need clearance from the board." The female agent stepped forward. "We're responding to a violation of the Endangered Species Act and the Clean Water Act, both of which override local homeowners association authority." Karen crossed her arms like a Disney villain. "That puddle barely runs year-round." The agent's face didn't move. "That puddle is a registered spawning habitat for Oncorhynchus mycis, an endangered species of steelhead trout. Obstructing it is a federal offense." Karen blinked, slowly, like her brain was buffering. "I want to speak to your supervisor," she snapped. The male agent nodded upriver. "He's already watching," he said. Sure enough, another agent in a beige windbreaker was upstream taking soil samples, scanning sediment with a portable antenna. And then came the moment. The agents walked directly onto Karen's reflection area and began dismantling the fence. One used bolt cutters. One took photos and labeled the removed materials. And the third? She pulled out a handheld scanner that started beeping. The agent looked up at Karen. "See this signal? One of the buried fish migration transmitters. Your fencing triggered a disruption last week. That's why we're here." Karen's face lost all color. "No one told me there were transmitters," she barked. "You didn't ask," the agent replied. I bit the inside of my cheek to stop myself from laughing. By now, the neighbors were out in full force, peeking through blinds, pretending to water already dead plants, openly filming. A woman down the street clutched her rosary like she was watching The Exorcist. Karen, in one last act of desperation, lunged for the bolt cutters in the agent's hands. "You can't take this down. This is part of my design." She was met with absolute stillness. The agent calmly retrieved the tool and said, "Interfering with a federal investigation is a criminal offense. I recommend you step aside." Karen did not step aside. So they called the county sheriff. 15 minutes later, a cruiser pulled up. Karen was escorted, politely but firmly, back to her property. Her smoothie spilled. Her clipboard trembled. Her ego? Crumbling. By late afternoon, the Serenity fence was gone. In its place, a plain white sign staked into the earth, "Federal property, do not disturb." And beside it, a few tiny monitoring posts, poking out of the ground like sentinels. You'd think after being humiliated by actual federal agents, most people would take a break, reflect, maybe touch some grass, spiritually or otherwise. Not Karen. 48 hours after the fence takedown, she re-emerged, reincarnated in full-blown villain mode. But she didn't come alone. She came with a lawyer. A bright blue Tesla pulled into her driveway like it was auditioning for a tech startup ad. The license plate read, "By law." Out stepped a man in a lavender three-piece suit. Slicked back hair, mirrored sunglasses, and a jawline so sharp it probably had its own agent. His name? Bryce Hawthorne. HOA rumor mill said he once sued an entire city over inconsistent planter shapes. He was the kind of attorney who specialized in decorative freedom litigation, which is just a fancy way of saying he'd represent anyone who wanted to paint a fire hydrant pink and call it out. Together, Karen and Bryce strutted into the HOA clubhouse, which was really just a glorified pool equipment closet with folding chairs. She had a massive binder of color-coded complaints. He had a briefcase and the kind of smile that should come with background music. Their announcement: "We are suing for unauthorized government intrusion, property damage, and emotional distress caused by environmental overreach." He actually used the phrase "federal tree hugger tyranny." That evening, I got a letter, certified mail, gold ink, hand-delivered to my porch like it was an invitation to a royal duel. Inside was a formal grievance from Karen, accusing me of conspiring with outside authorities, undermining local governance, and, my favorite, creating a hostile vibration field by weaponizing nature. She even requested a restraining order, claiming that my proximity to the creek caused daily spiritual distress and hydration imbalance. I nearly spit out my drink. The court hearing was scheduled within 48 hours. Not a full-blown trial, but enough for Karen to turn it into the People's Court, HOA edition. I showed up in jeans and a clean shirt. Karen arrived in a white pantsuit, an American flag scarf, and a look that screamed, "I've been practicing this speech in the mirror for weeks." Bryce walked in behind her like a peacock in a lavender fog, carrying binders and a Bluetooth earpiece he never took out. The courtroom wasn't packed, but a few curious neighbors had come. You could tell this was the local drama of the week. HOA tea was about to get spilled. At the front of it all sat Judge Rosalind Keene, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, and so done with everyone's nonsense. Bryce opened with a 10-minute monologue that sounded like a TED Talk for conspiracy theorists. He claimed the creek was spiritually stagnant, the Federal Registry was outdated, and the fence was a meditative lattice of emotional containment. Karen nodded along dramatically, holding up blurry photos of the creek before and after the enhancement. One even showed me fishing. She claimed it was proof of aggressive territorial energy. Then it was my turn. I handed the judge email correspondence with Fish and Wildlife, a copy of my land deed, a printed map of the federally protected steelhead habitat with registry numbers. The judge flipped through the pages. Then she looked at Bryce. "Mr. Hawthorne, are you aware this stream is listed on a federal endangered species registry?" Bryce adjusted his tie. "That list is subject to local zoning overrides." I tried not to laugh. The judge raised an eyebrow. "This was updated last year, and your client submitted HOA documents claiming communal rights over clearly private land." Karen burst in. "But it's visible from the walking path. That makes it communal." Judge Keene didn't even blink. "Visibility is not ownership, ma'am. And obstructing a federally monitored ecosystem is not legal, no matter how many signs you laminate." Karen opened her mouth again, but the judge raised a hand. "Ma'am, this is a hearing, not a town hall. Please contain your vibrations." Then came the twist. The judge invited a Fish and Wildlife agent to testify, the same woman who had dismantled the fence 3 days earlier. She stepped forward calmly and laid it out. Karen drove steel posts into a spawning ground, blocked migration paths of endangered steelhead trout, tampered with federally monitored equipment, and introduced foreign landscaping materials that could choke native vegetation. The room went silent. Even Bryce stopped smiling. Then the agent said the phrase that sealed the deal: depending on the environmental impact, criminal charges may still be pursued. Karen sputtered. I didn't know. No one told me it was federal. The judge replied flatly. You were told the day the fence came down. You chose to proceed anyway. The decision came fast. Restraining order, denied. Karen, ordered to cease all Creek-related activity. Any future tampering, referred to the U.S. Attorney's Office. And then came the cherry on top. Karen was fined $45,000 for environmental damage, unauthorized HOA spending, and hiring legal counsel without board approval. Bryce's jaw hit the floor. Karen's face went from red to ghost white to an oddly satisfying shade of crushed ambition. Dean and I didn't say a word. We didn't need to. We just walked out past Karen's blue Tesla and smiled like the creek had spoken for itself. The creek was safe. Karen's fence was rubble, and the whole neighborhood knew what went down. But this was only Act 1. Because Karen, she doesn't back off, she escalates. You'd think a $45,000 fine and a federal dressing down would humble someone. But this is Karen Albright we're talking about, the HOA queen who once cited a child for unauthorized lemonade commerce. She didn't get quiet. She got weird. First came the smell, a faint, acrid funk drifting along the creek like regret and chemical glue. It smelled like wet concrete, burnt plastic, and denial. Mabel wouldn't go near it. That's when I knew something was up. Next morning, Dean showed up holding a fish in a bucket, belly up. Dead. And definitely not from natural causes. Found this guy flopping on the bank, he said. Jaw tight. Then he just stopped. We followed the creek downstream behind Karen's house. And that's where we saw it. A crude cement wall, still damp, poured directly into the narrow bend of the stream. It looked like someone tried to build a dam using cinder blocks. Quikrete. And spite. A dented plastic bucket nearby read water flow redirector, probably stolen from a janitor's closet. Karen had tried to reroute a federally protected stream with backyard tools and Pinterest-level landscaping skills. Dean didn't even speak. He just pulled out his phone, took photos, and said, "We're reporting this, now." I sent the report, photos, GPS data, and a short video to the Fish and Wildlife agents. But I also did something else. Something a little petty. Justice 101. I posted a single image to our anonymous neighborhood message board, Karen's backyard. The creek. The concrete wall. No names. No captions. Just one line. When your neighbor loses in court and tries to rewire nature. The post exploded overnight. Comments poured in. Is this a scene from Creek Wars? HOA strikes back? Somebody tell her rivers aren't optional. I didn't realize we lived next to a Bond villain with a Lowe's discount card. It went viral. Local news outlets picked it up. A wildlife YouTuber made a reaction video. Someone even created a fake movie poster called Karen vs. Nature, The Final Wall. But that wasn't the best part. Turns out, during their first visit, the Fish and Wildlife team had reactivated motion-triggered trail cams along the creek, used to monitor both wildlife and illegal dumping. And one of those cameras caught Karen in full saboteur mode. There she was, in night vision glory, dressed in a white painter's jumpsuit, wearing a headlamp and night vision goggles, dragging a wheelbarrow full of quikrete, singing something that sounded suspiciously like a warped version of the Star-Spangled Banner. At one point, she slipped, cursed, and hurled a bucket into the bushes. It was a performance art piece of suburban madness. The agency emailed me the next morning, "Thank you. We're on our way." This time they didn't come alone. They brought 2 more federal agents, an environmental chemist, a rep from the State Department of Fish and Game. They cordoned off the area, tested the soil and water, and began dismantling the wall. Karen came outside mid-process, still in her bathrobe, and screamed, "You're trespassing with shovels." The female agent calmly showed her the night vision footage. Karen went still. Then she launched into a rant so incomprehensible. Even the squirrels stopped to stare. She claimed the video was AI generated. She had been drugged by herbal tea. She was actually testing an erosion control concept inspired by sacred geometry. And then she demanded a lawyer, an HOA representative, and a spiritual medium. She got none of those. What she got was a formal arrest for tampering with a federally protected habitat. They didn't cuff her, just walked her to the SUV like she was a confused cult leader mid-meltdown. But then, the footage leaked. I didn't leak it. Dean didn't. Someone from the community board or a records request, who knows. But within hours, the internet had it. Reddit, TikTok, YouTube. Karen became #CreekKaren, #ConcreteGate, and my personal favorite, #WetCementEnergy. Late night shows reenacted it with sock puppets. One anchor called it the most unhinged act of suburban environmental sabotage since someone tried to vacuum the Grand Canyon. After her night vision sabotage went viral, Karen Albright vanished. No morning yoga grants. No HOA email blasts about patriotic bunting violations. Her flamingo lawn army? Gone. It was like her house was trying to erase its own history. But just when we thought it was over, nature had one more surprise. A week into the restoration effort, the creek was finally flowing clear. Volunteers showed up daily, students, retirees, conservationists. Dean supervised like a grizzled general, wearing camo and handing out sandwiches like they were medals. Then one afternoon, Dean waved me over. He was standing near the bend behind Karen's property, the same spot where her ill-fated fence had stood. He pointed at a chunk of mossy stone, half buried in the dirt. "See that?" We started digging. Beneath the stone was a rusted metal hinge. Then a hatch. It was sealed tight, but clearly not new. Dean's hands trembled. My great-granddad worked this land back in the late 1800s. There were stories about a lost claim box from the gold rush days. We pried it open. Inside, old government documents, maps, letters, a velvet pouch holding silver and gold coins dated 1872. The real jackpot, though, was a set of federal land grants and mineral rights paperwork, including original water access claims for the creek. We called the county museum. The historian nearly passed out. Not only were the documents real, they strengthened the creek's protected status and proved that the land around it had once been classified as federally significant. Meaning, Karen hadn't just picked a fight with fish and wildlife. She'd been tampering with a historical site. The county moved fast. The area was declared a historical conservation zone. A plaque was installed at the creek bend, in honor of early stewards of the land and the enduring natural history of creekside binds. Local schools started planning field trips. Environmental groups pledged long-term restoration. Karen? She was done. The HOA board called an emergency meeting, this time without her. Result? Karen was banned from all future HOA participation. Her access card to the community center was deactivated. Her flamingos? Removed as a symbolic gesture of exile. The best part? She had to write an apology letter. Not just to me, to every single household in the neighborhood. 2 weeks later, it arrived. Printed on pink cardstock. Signed in glitter pen. To my judgmentally rigid neighbors. It got worse from there. She claimed her landscaping vision had been misunderstood. Her actions were intuitively guided by the earth, and that we were all tragically earthbound. Dean laughed so hard he framed it and hung it next to his fishing trophies. But the real kicker? A photo surfaced days later. Karen, in a reflective vest, picking up trash by the creek under supervision of the same agents who once arrested her. The caption? Creek Silicon's finest. The HOA group chat imploded. One neighbor made t-shirts. Someone commissioned a woodcut art piece of Karen in night goggles with the words, "Nature wins." Her lawyer, Bryce Hawthorne, quietly rebranded himself as a litigation wellness coach and started a podcast called Zen and Subpoenas that lasted 3 episodes before fading into obscurity. Karen, according to the grapevine, moved to Arizona to reconnect with dry energy. Last we heard, she was arguing with a park ranger at the Grand Canyon about trail widths and line-of-sight harmonics. As for me, I got my creek back. Dean and I still fish there on Saturdays, now joined by local kids, a biology teacher, and Mabel, who still chases frogs and still misses every single one. The water runs clean now. The trout have returned. So have the herons. And the quiet. One morning, I stood by the bend where the plaque sits now, sunlight hitting the water like gold, and I smiled. Not because Karen was gone, but because the land outlasted her.